Well, this time I won't actually know when we're on the air because I'm not looking at my screen.
We're already on the air.
Wait, when did we go on the air?
Oh, I didn't notice it either.
All right. Welcome to SuggestCast. We have joining us tonight Ben Hopscotch Heaton,
Hello?
the Raptor Smith, Vincent
Hi.
Rage Watkins,
Yo.
and let's get started.
All right, so we have 3 suggestions from last time to discuss.
Yeah.
Gregory Horror Show, Only Forward, and David Foster Wallace essay with a long title.
Yeah. On the nearly lethal comforts of a luxury cruise. / a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. It had different titles depending on when it was printed. Let's start with Gregory Horror Show.
All right, now who here watched this?
I watched 7 episodes.
I watched the entire first season
Why did you do that to yourself?
for SuggestCast.
Okay.
Some of us care about this little project of ours.
Yeah, well, you'll find out when we get to the book that I didn't read your book.
Why didn't you? You had like 3 weeks to do it.
I had a lot of stuff going on.
It's a short book.
You're a short book. Okay. I bought it. Like, I spent money to purchase the book. I just didn't get a chance to read it.
Wow, I wasn't expecting you to spend money on it.
Why? Am I going to be upset that I did that?
Well, I figured you'd just get a library or something.
I got it at the library called paying Amazon for it. On
Yeah.
Kindle. Let's start with Gregory.
I rarely buy the books we talk about. I usually just get library copies and such.
Oh, quit bragging. All right. So, Ben, why don't you begin to share some of your thoughts on Gregory Horror Show?
Yeah, well, first of all, Matt, did you watch Gregory Horror Show? Matt, are you here?
Matt's sort of like the Synod ghost.
Okay, Ashley, did you watch Gregory Horror Show?
No.
Okay. All right, so this was, well, it is a horror show. The episodes are very short,
Yeah.
they're like 2.5 minutes long, and that counts the intro sequence. Liz, why are you? It doesn't
These
matter.
are my reactions to Gregory Horror Show and the things you were saying about it.
Okay, and it's about this person who goes to a hotel and
The hotel is set in 1992 computer animation.
well, the hotel is set in Animal Crossing land.
No, Animal Crossing has better animation.
No, I mean like the style of the characters. Like the hotel is run by this mouse guy named Gregory, I think.
Was it supposed to be a mouse?
Yeah.
I actually looked up when Reboot was made to see if it was right to say that Reboot predated this by like a good 6 years and was like considerably better animation quality. And it turns out that's right. Reboot preceded this Reboot. What's Reboot?
Yeah.
It's like a famous like half-hour long computer animated cartoon.
I've never seen it.
But you've heard of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I've never seen it.
It's just like a one-shot deal, just a half-hour show.
No. It was like a multi-season TV series. That had a computer, and whenever the user would play a game, one of the characters on the show would have to enter the game and try and beat the user, otherwise characters from the show would get deleted.
So it's like Tron.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Tron, but with better computer... It's computer animated.
Okay. Well, I'll agree that may have technically better graphics than Gregory
Everything
Horror
has
Show.
better graphics than Gregory Horror Show. Your drawing of Sonic the Hedgehog on crayon skis was better than the
Those weren't skis, those were his feet.
Whatever. All right.
Anyway,
Sorry, continue.
so there's some horror scenarios going on. Like the hotel is a chef who, it's implied, kills people to put in his soup.
Now, was it,
There's this cat who's eyes and mouth and such have all been stitched up.
He's really a kid who's got an axe in his head, and he's the child of an adult with a scimitar in his head.
Yeah, kids sure do like stitches.
What?
Kids sure do like stitches, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, heels and stuff.
It's supposed to be a horror show? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be...
Yeah, there's definitely some creepy themes going on there.
Yeah, but, like, it's the same way that Night Vale had creepy themes, but nobody's like, oh, I was so scared of Night Vale.
Well, I read some of the comments on these videos, and people were, in fact, creeped out by this.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's surprising that I bothered to read comments on YouTube videos.
No, it's surprising that... Yeah, first off, it's surprising that the comments weren't just, like, random racial slurs or whatever, but also...
There were some of those, too.
Okay. What I don't understand is how anyone can be scared of this. This is like a thing I would show children to make them realize that even ghosts aren't scary. Like, I'd be like, look, how could you be scared of this rectangle that's talking at you?
Okay, the graphics weren't that bad. That's...
The scares were that bad, though. There were not spooks in this Spook 'em Up. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know, there's some creepy situations there.
In the same way that,
Like with this guy feeling trapped in this horrible hotel that he can't leave, where he's being subjected to various torments.
He doesn't seem that scared about it, though. Like, he has the
Yeah,
most
he does.
monotone presentation of his...
Well,
like...
I don't know, I thought that his introductory parts at the beginnings of episodes, which is the only part where we hear him speaking,
yeah,
they did convey, as the series went on, the sense of him being just worn down by despair.
I could see getting worn down and despaired if I had to live through that whole series.
Well, you might be surprised to learn that at the end of the first season, he actually does escape the hotel. It goes back to reality, which looks more like live action. But then he chooses to go back.
Okay.
So think about that.
I guess to be surprised about that, I'd have to care about it more.
Well,
Imagine that.
And now here's a question. How far did you get in this? Did you see the character Judgment Boy?
I don't know. I saw the nurse that makes orgasm sounds while she draws her blood. That was, I guess, disturbing. Because it sounded like she was having an orgasm while she was drawing her blood.
Alright, so you did find this disturbing.
Yeah, but not in, like, a creepy way. Just like a... I don't know.
You wouldn't be creeped out if a nurse were behaving that way to you.
I would if a real nurse were. Like,
And drawing way too much blood out of you in a giant syringe.
that part wouldn't be as scary as the noises that the nurse was making.
Lewis is saying he would have no idea how to react if he ever heard a woman having an orgasm.
That is the correct way to take it. Oh, all right. So I said
the Judgment Boy, I thought, was a pretty interesting character.
I don't think I got to him.
He had that song that he would sing. Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy. Do you remember that song?
No, I didn't get to that song.
I thought he came up pretty early in it, and he's a recurring character who takes on a more important role than you would expect.
7 episodes.
Maybe he's in episode 8.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that's the case.
Well, I watched it. I tried to figure out what Vincent could possibly have been recommending this for. And I did not come up with any reason why anyone would ever want to reference this, unless it's like some sort of like cautionary tale about how not to do computer animation.
Well, I don't know. It could be the disconnect between the graphical style and the subject matter. Like, it's an odd choice to have your atmospheric horror show be done with, like, a little talking mouse.
Yeah.
Characters who are basically cubes with faces on them.
Yeah. I guess they were cubes rather than rectangles. That's a fair point.
Yeah, it's three-dimensional.
Okay. What else did you get out of watching it? Did you enjoy it? Did you?
I I was actually kind of interested by just how short the episodes were and how they tried to put something self-contained in each one. I mean, there is an overarching plot to the season, but
Right.
each episode has to contain its own kind of beats.
Right. And each opening narration has to have a little... Well, yeah.
So, Lewis, imagine for a moment that this had animation that you liked. Like that the art quality of it was up to your standards. Would you have enjoyed it then?
I wouldn't have been as annoyed by it, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because, like, even the spooky things that were supposed to be spooky, it wasn't like just that there was this jarringly unfrightening animation going along with it. It was also like, just, I don't know, it wasn't triggering my spook reflexes the same way that, like, when I watch even a mediocre horror movie and they just have a thing jump out from nowhere or, like, any of that sort of startle you stuff, like, I'm at least, like, that gets me into the... They usually have a setup that, like, gets me a little bit creeped out. Like, there's a movie that's out now where the trailer, they're, like, in the catacombs under Paris and they find, like, their car from when they were 17 or, like, a piano that has, like, the same broken key as the piano from their house when they grew up, and I'm like, that's creepy. That's a creepy thing. And, like, just, oh, it's a crazy nurse seems like a little bit too, I don't know. It's too,
it's this weird-looking girl who's crying about losing her doll, but then the main character goes to hug her, and she, like, goes, ah! And then it turns out that she is the doll.
I was sort of startled by that for a second, but I wasn't, like, scared startled. It was just like, oh, that got a lot louder.
But what about the reveal that she doesn't realize she is the doll that was thrown away?
Yeah, if Barry was making that noise sarcastically, then I agree with Barry.
I think it was sincere.
It was sincere.
All right, then I agree with the sarcastic version of what Barry just did. All right.
So, Vincent, what were you hoping we would get out of this?
All right. Well, I'll say four things about it. The last thing I say will be the actual reason that I suggested it. I'll say, number one, I think that what makes it hardest to watch is the way that it's broken up into those short episodes, every one of which has its own introduction, so that as soon as you start to get into it, then it's like you have to stop and start all over again and wait like 45 seconds before it gets back into the story. So I found it kind of hard to watch in that way too. I don't know in what way it was originally displayed. If it was part of like an anthology series like Liquid Television or something, I think it would play pretty well. But trying to sit down and watch a season of it straight is really annoying for that reason. Two, I agree with you about Judgment Boy. I didn't know what to make of this, but as soon as I saw Judgment Boy, which is well before episode 7 that Judgment Boy comes out.
What describe Judgment Boy to me, apart from that he's a cube or whatever?
No, he's basically scales. He weighs two sides of a decision.
What I loved about Judgment Boy is the first time you see Judgment Boy, there is absolutely zero explanation about what he is or why he's coming down the hallway.
He just goes by singing, and then later there's an episode where he actually talks.
He's like hanging on a thing, like a track along the ceiling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then I do remember him now.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay. Yeah, he did not help with the spooky feeling because he was singing too upbeat of a song with him.
That song's not upbeat.
It's just
ominous.
Okay, you're ominous. All right, so what's number 2?
Well, he is pretty ominous.
3. This was not the reason I suggested it, although it made me think of Night Vale, kind of like the way that Lewis suggested, except unlike Lewis, I consider this like a better version of what we talked about in Night Vale, of something being sort of creepy and unsettling without much of an additional purpose.
Okay, wait, let me just say one thing about that. The way that you felt about the idea that Night Vale is supposed to be comedy is how I feel about this is supposed to be horror. That's what happened. Like this is like they understand some of the elements of horror in the sense that they put them in there, but they did not succeed at all in making it like do the thing that horror is supposed to do. And I feel like people who actually do that should be insulted by the thought that this is horror.
I don't really care about the people who are trying to make horror, though.
They don't make scary movies. I mean, movies aren't scary. Horror movies aren't scary. Whatever. Anyway, the real reason, and
Take
actually,
that, horror.
Lewis essentially, take that. Anyone who ever thought a movie was scary.
What about scary movie?
Wait, what did I do?
No, I was saying you pretty much hit on what I suggested it for, and this is not something I suggested like most things I suggest that I think is really good, and then I just say it's also unique in some way that I can't really... What?
This was Retribution, wasn't it?
No.
Retribution
it was,
for what?
I guess, like, proactive retribution for the David Foster Wallace essay is what he's saying. No.
The other things I've made.
You are absolutely correct that the animation in this is reminiscent of early 90s, not video games in general, but like puzzle games or adventure games, first-person games like, well, specifically Seventh Guest. The animation in this and a lot of the graphics are dead-on imitations of the Seventh Guest. Have you guys played Seventh Guest?
Yeah, I wish you recommended that.
Well, here's the thing. This was years later, right?
Yeah, this was 1999.
Yeah, this is... What's that?
This was 1999 to 2006 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was years later. It's imitating that style. It's not like that was like the most readily available animation style. It seems to be deliberately evoking the aesthetic of those sorts of computer games, but not in a context in which it's making it apparent to the viewer that's what it's doing. By which I mean, if you look at something like Homestuck that evokes video game aesthetic and what it does so very self-consciously, and it tells everyone that's what it's doing, and it's doing it because the characters are sort of in a video game. And I can't think of any other work besides Gregory Horror Show that attempts to evoke the aesthetics of those video games, but without letting on that it has anything to do with video games. Like when you're watching this, it's not trying to make you think that the guy is in a video game or that there's a video game going on, or it's not referencing video games, but it's absolutely borrowing from the aesthetic of those old games. Everything from, the first-person view, and when the guest interacts with things, how they just like doors will just open, things will just move without you seeing hands coming out. That's just like the old stuff. He sort of moves on a track, and then when he gets someplace, just freezes in place, like the old, which makes sense in computer games when you've got to interact with objects and the screen shouldn't be moving around. But it's sort of arbitrary for a cartoon, where obviously it could be doing whatever. I thought that was interesting, and it's not something I can think of seeing very much. Although I could even as being a concept I would want to reference. The only problem I have with using this as a reference is I think that's a pretty easy idea to explain, maybe, without referencing a bunch of works, but I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, that's what I thought. I thought it was kind of an interesting show anyway. But that's what really struck me about it, was that it was absolutely trying to look like the cutscenes and even some of the gameplay from those old adventure games and puzzle games, without having anything to do with that stuff.
I think I'm with you in that if it will cut together as like an ongoing thing, like I could watch like one 10-minute video that had 5 of the episodes in it or whatever, that would have been less frustrating than like a minute and a half of a thing at a time.
Yeah, well, I kind of got into a rhythm of watching it after the first 10 or so, but up until then, I was like pausing between episodes and going and doing something else.
That's it. That's what we got. It's moment of truth. It's vote time.
Oh, it's vote time? Alright. I'm gonna give it a thumbs down in that I don't think I will ever reference this unless I just want to explain to someone that, like, shitty rectangular animation existed in 99 to 2006.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I think I will reference it again, and I also think I'll be referencing the archetype of Judgment Boy.
The archetype of Judgment Boy?
Yeah. This show best exemplified that.
Vincent, what are you giving it?
I'm gonna give it a thumbs up for the reason I mentioned. Although I kind of agree with Ben, Judgment Boy is the kind of thing that I would usually recommend to work for, where I think it's really good and cool, but I can't really explain what is going on with it. Like,
Yeah, his
if I
shtick
saw
was
something like it,
his whole shtick was genuinely interesting, I thought.
yeah. So I'll see something like that in another work, and I won't know what to say about it. I'll just say, man, that's kind of like Judgment Boy.
So speaking of shtick that's interesting, let's talk about David Foster Wallace.
Okay, so he wrote this essay about how much he doesn't like cruises. Who here read it? I did.
I read as much as I could take.
What was that, like a page?
It
You
was
read until
less.
he had footnotes.
Yeah, it was less than the first page.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Let me tell you, I read this book for Ben, so it's not like I'm unwilling to put in the time and the effort.
Yeah, I know.
It's in this list. This is not a phrase that I ever use. I think it's a dumb phrase. I never use it, but I gotta say, life is just too short. I look at that. I start to read David Foster Wallace saying anything. And I'm just like, life is too short to force myself to read any more of this.
Let me tell you what's surprising. I can't believe that I've technically put more effort into doing your request this week than you put into doing mine. Because I was watching 7 episodes of this 2-minute episode thing. That's like 14 minutes of my time.
Yeah, Vincent put way more effort into my suggestion than you did.
I bought it. I spent money on the book.
Okay, that's effort, but it's kind of orthogonal to what was being asked of you.
All right, Ben, why don't you give a summary of what goes on in the article?
All right, so basically he talks at great length and in intense detail about his experiences on this cruise. He's very negative throughout, though honestly the cruise experience doesn't actually sound all that bad to me.
Okay.
There was a line early in it that I kind of liked when he was talking about how much he hates and fears the ocean itself. It may seem weird that the ultimate American fantasy vacation involves being plunked down in an enormous primordial stew of death and decay. Which, I mean, that is in a sense an accurate description of the ocean.
Yeah. Okay. Vincent, how far into the first page did you get?
I think I made it over to the second. You know, it's split down the middle. You have to read down. I think I made it the second half of the page, and then I think I started to skip forward to the second page to see whether it was just as bad there, and it was. And I said, I can't do this now. I have to come back later. And then I came back later, and I said, I'm just not going to do it.
Let me give
I
you
can't do
a warning, Vincent. My recommendation for next week is Infinite Jest.
I've read Infinite Jest.
Oh, you have?
I feel like I put in all the David Foster Wallace time that I need to put in for the rest of my life.
That is a lot of Foster Wallace stuff to put in. That's not actually my recommendation.
So, do you recommend Infinite Jest?
Me?
Vincent?
I'm
not asking if you're suggesting it.
No, I've said to people before that I'm glad I read Infinite Jest. I could not, in good conscience, recommend it to anybody. David Foster Wallace's extremely boring writing style comes into play there because he's frequently talking about like people who are coming off drugs or dealing with some kind of addiction, and they're dealing with extreme boredom or uneasiness or whatever that is actually then well conveyed through the writing. Outside of that context, outside of giving him that allowance, like, oh, okay, it's okay that it's painful to read your writing because it's helping me to understand the pain of your characters. Outside of that, I can't see any justification for putting up with this horseshit.
So you missed the part in this where he complains about someone else's writing. There's a long sequence where he talks about an essay that appeared in one of the cruise line's promotional brochures. It was actually a commissioned essay. He calls it an essay-mercial, written by Frank Conroy, a writer David Foster Wallace actually genuinely admired, and apparently talked with about this. He criticizes just the presence and concept of that essay at length. He does say that Frank Conroy was uniformly decent in all his discussions with him about having written it. There's a footnote where he gives two explanations for how it came to be written. One was a long speech from some cruise line liaison about how they commissioned the essay and ended up really loving it and Frank Conroy's style and so on. The second was Frank Conroy saying, basically, I prostituted myself. Yeah, I found a lot of humorous parts to this piece. It wasn't really that much of a chore to read. It has some amusing parts about his counter-surveillance efforts and trying to determine how the cleaning service knows when he's away from his room long enough that they can go in and clean.
Oh, yeah. I like the part when he's like, I went away for 29 minutes one time, I came back, it was still dirty. So later that day I went away for 31 minutes, and I came back and it was clean. Yeah.
Yeah, and he mentions that he tried to leave the room with exactly the same bearing each time so that they wouldn't be able to tell just by watching him leaving.
Yeah.
That is kind of a funny story now as you tell it. I bet that he told it at much greater length to communicate the same information, and probably with 5 footnotes.
It was several pages, yes.
There's only one footnote, I think, in that dash. There were far fewer footnotes in this than in Infinite Jest, even if you just go by density of footnotes and not sheer number.
I don't really see number of footnotes as a problem. I mean, I don't mind whether the word count happens mostly at the bottom of pages or not.
Just tedious, because either you have to stop and then go down and read this long footnote, or you leave it till later. But if you're leaving it till later, then what's the reason of even having the footnote there? Because it's no longer informing what you're reading at the time. Jesus Christ, it's just a pain in the ass. It's just it's like if there were like deleted scenes or alternate takes mixed right into the movie that you're trying to watch. Like as soon as you get to the scene, they just like stop watching the movie. Here, let's watch some other shit.
Right. With the effect being that it basically isn't deleted; it's just being put into your experience, but tagged as optional.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or reactions, Ben?
Well, he did include a lot of detail in this, a level of specificity that really went beyond what was required, and not even in ways that really supported what he was talking about, even just side details. Like, he would talk about other passengers and have a description like, next to me on the deck was a supine older lady reading Codependent No More. But that's not in the section where he's talking about his experience with the passengers. He's It's a part where he's talking about staying on the deck while most people have gone down to an island or whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of dropped in there. There's another part where he's describing some teenager at the restaurant who would be given $100 by her grandparents and then wouldn't even say thank you. And he spends several clauses on the specific presentation of the $100, that the type of envelope that it was in and the type of ink used to write to Mona on it. Things that, Vincent, I'm guessing that's one of the things that you disliked here.
Well, he didn't get to
Not those specifics, because you didn't get that far, but David Foster Wallace's habit of using a lot of detail, a kind of superfluous detail.
He seems to really enjoy the sound of his voice. Like I'm saying words. This is great. Listen to the words that I'm putting on this page. The words that I'm writing are just incredible. I'm going to drop a footnote explaining why they're incredible.
To be clear, you're not criticizing his voice exactly, but how much he is in love with it.
Yeah. Well, and then the way that informs the way he chooses to edit or not edit his writing. I mean, it seems like a weird comparison, but I got the same problem with Stephen King, who writes a 1,200-page novel that could probably be told in 200 pages, just because he just loves to hear his own descriptions of shit. He loves to have unnecessary dialogue. He loves everything he has to say.
Vincent,
And so do a lot of people.
Vincent, did you read that David Foster Wallace short letter that I posted to Sign-On the other day?
Yeah.
It was a letter to the editor saying,
Don't edit me.
Stuff.
Yeah.
He puts a lot of thought into the sound.
I know. He's got... Look, I mean, my criticism of David Foster Wallace is, who cares? I mean, he's a successful guy, who he was before he killed himself, and he's well-respected, and everybody loves him, so who cares that he annoys me, but I just can't deal with it. It annoys the hell out of me.
But, for such a supposedly thoughtful writer, he sure did uncritically repeat the myth about vomitoriums in there.
Oh, is that...
Did you notice that?
Yeah. What was the myth?
Like that vomitoriums were rooms where the Romans would go to throw up.
Well, when you're putting down every single thought you've ever had into everything you write, you don't have a lot of time to do research, check facts.
Yeah, he did not do a lot of research.
This is research, specifically in other parts of it.
Yeah,
I was going to say, sometimes it does just seem like he cracked a book open and started copying out of the dictionary or something. Well, Infinite Jest, I mean, is pretty much what he does for part of it.
It's interesting, the pattern of where he researches and where he doesn't, because there's things where he's openly speculating about stuff that he could easily have just verified,
like what knots are.
Or that kid's T-shirt where he's I later discovered that it was the name of a band. I will guess that they are a punk band, but
yeah, it's hard to imagine the level of research that would tell you they're a band, but not that they're a punk band.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Okay, any other thoughts or reflections on this piece?
Yeah, it made me think going for a cruise would be pretty nice.
Yeah, okay.
And I take back what I said. I take back what I said. My criticism is correct and everyone else is wrong, and David Foster Wallace is awful.
Okay.
Okay. Is it my turn to say why I...
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the experience where I read this piece. I was going on a cruise, and somebody recommended it to me. And then I read it, and I was telling somebody else about it, and they had read it, and they said that they thought it was just very mean-spirited. And, David Foster Wallace is very much, looking down his nose at all these people on the cruise. And it was interesting because, superficially, I can see why somebody might come away with the conclusion that he was looking down his nose at the people on the cruise.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, like, it seems like the target of his, like, derision and ire are, like, a couple of specific elements of the Cruise Corporation, or, like, one or two people that are, like, you know, employees of the Cruise. Like, the guy that he gave... First off, he does some juvenile nicknaming stuff in here, and I could do
Yeah,
it.
he calls the hotel manager Dermatitis when his last name is Dermatis.
Yeah. Just because he doesn't like him. Like, it's, you know, like, it's just
Well,
very...
they had some long-running feud that he may have been imagining.
Yeah. But so what struck me was that the descriptions of the patrons. So to me, when I read it, my reaction was, this is a man who's profoundly sad and alienated, like, from society, and like this experience of the cruise just constantly reminded him that he can't just enjoy a game of shuffleboard because he's like too much in his own head and like doesn't feel like he can relate to human beings. Like,
But he has some pretty unflattering portraits of some of the fellow cruise goers.
he does, yeah.
I agree that his main target is the cruise company itself,
But and then also
and specifically
like,
the Greeks.
yeah, I guess there's an element of racism to that was going on there, but no, but like I don't know, it just like the whole thing made me feel like he. Like, it didn't make me feel like deep down he was disapproving of these people, but that he was jealous that they could enjoy shuffleboard in a way that he couldn't.
So is you suggesting that David Foster Wallace was on some level unhappy or depressed?
That's an inappropriate joke.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
well,
can't joke about celebrities who killed themselves, Ben. That's we don't cross those lines here. God, we got to be respectful.
What?
David Foster Wallace's mother could be watching this show.
I mean, honestly, I am kind of unhappy that he did kill himself. I would
I'm
prefer.
glad. I wish he could have killed himself twice.
Okay, hang on. Let's bring it back for a second. My point was, it was interesting to me that the person that I talked to about this, like, their reaction was like that they thought that he was like so judgmental about them, and like to me, the same way that like you read it, and you're like, it actually sounded like a cruise would be pretty nice, like.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it was pretty nice for him.
No, but like, despite all of his efforts to make it sound unpleasant, what come across is like, David Foster Wallace did not enjoy this cruise, but most people would. Like, I don't know. So that's what I thought was like that the surface level of what was going on there was so different from like what I think I took away and what I expect most people would take away.
You're saying it's sort of an unreliable narrator thing.
Yes.
Where we've been presented with this piece by David Foster Wallace, but what we're meant to get out of it isn't what David Foster Wallace, the character in our fiction, seems to be trying to do.
Well, it's almost like he's written a better ad for the cruise company than the one he was complaining about the other guy writing. Like when I was rereading this for this week, I was like, I actually. Like, I've been on cruises. I didn't enjoy them that much. But when I read his description, I was like, maybe I would want to be on this cruise.
Yeah, I've read essays about people having unpleasant experiences on cruises before that conveyed that a lot more strongly than this.
Where the result was that you thought a cruise would be unpleasant rather than that a cruise would be pleasant.
Yeah, where I'm thinking, oh man, that is a horrible, awkward situation. I'm sure glad that didn't happen to me.
Yeah. This time you're like, I'm sure glad I'm not David Foster Wallace, because if this happened to me, I would enjoy it. Alright, so final judgment time. Ben?
I don't know. I enjoyed reading this, but I don't think that I'll be referring back to it for the reasons you suggested there.
Or other reasons?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I did like the over-specific details that he gave, but if I were going to give somebody an example of that, I think I would use, like, Achewood or something.
Okay.
So, thumbs down for me.
Alright, Vincent?
Well, I don't know how fair it is for me to get a vote, but to the extent I have any vote, it's thumbs down.
Okay.
No one should ever have to read anything by David Foster Wallace.
Because you're still torn up about his suicide. That's the...
We all gotta die. Some of us get to choose when.
I will
Right here.
thumbs down.
Okay.
Barry?
Oh, I like cruises, so thumbs up.
Awesome.
Alright, so 3-1, thumbs down.
Oh no, Barry gets double votes though, so it's 3-2. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Alright, so next is the novel Only Forward. So Vincent read and nobody else did, despite having like a month.
I purchased it and it was 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't care what you buy.
One of those weeks was my birthday week, then.
You celebrate your birthday for a whole week?
Well, I celebrated for 3 different days because I had a party that I threw, and now Vincent can be all judgy because I saw his thing earlier about not liking when people organize their own birthday parties.
Yeah, you like birthday parties, you just don't want kids to be told that they exist.
That makes sense.
So I had a party on Saturday, and then on Sunday people had me over for dinner, and then on Monday, which was my actual birthday, people took me out for dinner, and then on Thursday there was a department welcome party that was not related to my birthday, but it was still a thing that was keeping me from having an evening to read a book.
Okay, so normally all your reading is done at dinner, and you can't do that when the dinner is a party.
We'll say yes. You know what? Okay. Next time, don't recommend a whole book. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, Vincent's already said he's recommending Infinite Jest for this next week, so...
That is what Vincent said.
Alright, so, Vincent, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this book.
I should say, I read this book in anticipation of last weekend. I didn't realize we weren't doing a SuggestCast then, and I was all fired up. I was ready to go. I just finished it, and I had just had this long dialogue in my head about what I wanted to say, and I don't remember what it was now, except the summary of it is this kind of bad writing makes me so like angry and disappointed with the world. And it's like, this is the kind of thing that, like, I don't have the ability or the patience to write a better book. Like, I just wish the world.
About that.
Well,
I bought a shitty book. This was a shitty book that you recommended. God damn.
Vincent's opinions do not necessarily reflect my own.
Okay.
All right. Also,
I was
I couldn't.
suggesting it and not recommending it.
Here's the thing. It's a straight book. Like, it's not. I'm not trying to like knock myself or like fishing for compliments or anything. I could write a book that's like some weird book that maybe is worth reading, but I can't write a normal book. I couldn't write a book that's going to populate the shelves of a bookstore, which is what this is. This is like a normal book, but it's infuriatingly stupid. I mean, it starts out, it's this weird sci-fi detective novel, and it's like, okay, it's the sci-fi world's a little goofy, but the detective part's a little goofy as well, so it's kind of like a comedic detective story. And then about a third of the way through, maybe, all of a sudden they
closer to halfway, I think.
About halfway point, they cross into Dreamland, called Dreamland. And I mean, they walk across the ocean to go into the land of dreams, where dreams occur, where people go and they dream. And I can't emphasize enough that this doesn't tie in any way to any of the sci-fi stuff that's been established to that point. It's like this guy got to that point and he thought, you know what would be a better book? I should have been writing about this stupid Dreamland idea I had. How people can just walk into Dreamland if they try to walk across the ocean when someone on an airplane has a funny feeling about it. Which sounds like a stupid summary, but it is exactly what fucking happens in the book.
That is accurate.
All of a sudden,
are you suggesting that as the writer was writing this book, they thought maybe I should go back and change the premise, but instead realized that they could go only forward?
Louis, you're more right than you know.
That's
Yeah.
pretty intense.
I mean, if I wouldn't be surprised actually if that were an explanation. Although we know that they did, or I suspect they did go back at some point because there's a prologue at the beginning that ties into the end. If it did so without forward planning, if they really did just write forward to backward without planning, then that was a pretty. No, it's still stupid.
Well,
Anyway,
there is some other foreshadowing for it early on, but it's the sort of thing that's only really going to pop out on a second read, stuff where the narrator says there's something that he's not telling you yet, that kind of thing.
Are you going to suggest a second read of this book for next week?
Well, I did reread it in preparation for this episode, but no, I don't think I will.
now see, when I was reading it, and there were a lot of places where the author would say, but we're not going to talk about that right now, or we don't need to get into it, which I kind of liked. It gives you the idea that there's more to this character than what we're seeing in the book. Like, this is a character who's had a series of adventures. But actually, by the time you get to the end of the book and you feel like all those holes have kind of been filled in, then plus you don't give a shit about the character anymore just because everything's so stupid. Like, where this character came from is this character walked across the ocean into Dreamland back in the mid-'90s, and then crossed from Dreamland into this futuristic sci-fi Wonderland. Later found out that the Wonderland actually was the future of the world that he came from, but he couldn't get back to the past, and then just had crazy adventures in the future. But someone he had killed who was his friend that lived in his... who somehow still survived and could do stuff, started killing people, and like the whole mystery that was set up in the first half of the book was essentially just arbitrary crap to pull him out so that he would try to solve the mystery and end up coming into contact with this guy from his past, blah, blah, blah. I mean, everything about it just seemed to be garbage. It's like, as soon as you're waiting, okay, like, well, let's see where this is going. Oh, it's going into the shitter. Let's see where he's going to go with this. Oh, it's just going to get worse and worse. It's just going to get so stupid until you can't stand it. So it made me, and it was so promising. It was so promising at the beginning, I thought. Like, I was really digging it, and I was glad you recommended it. And then once they get into that Dreamland stuff, and even then, you still think, like, okay, maybe this is just like a little side trip, like maybe they're going to reconnect, they're still going to go back and solve the mystery. No, mystery's just total horseshit. It's like, yeah, somebody did some art. I mean, it really was just somebody set up this thing to make it look like a mystery, essentially, to pull him into trying to solve this mystery so that they could go to some weird dream experience and some guy would get sent back to the past without a head, and then an evil guy would disappear for reasons I couldn't follow. And you know what? I don't even mind stories that are incomprehensible. I've recommended that stuff all the time on here. I'll recommend something and I'll say I like it because it evokes emotions, or or it makes you feel certain things without you being able to understand why. Because there's no comprehensible narrative, but you still feel as though something meaningful has happened. I mean, I love stuff like that, but this wasn't like that. This wasn't like weird, surreal stuff. This was just a total cop-out. And once you can cross into Dreamland and cross back and forth, and the rules of Dreamland change all the time, from whether it's like you're a real person in a dream, or you're controlling the dream, or other bits, anything can happen. They can do anything they want. Stupid, incomprehensible bullshit, dead people, light portals coming out of them, you walk through. It's, what it reminds me of is Chrono Cross. Now that's what we should have recommended. Chrono Cross is a good example of something with a stupid storyline. Okay, never mind. That's my take on the book.
Okay.
The sequel to Chrono Trigger?
The
sequel to Chrono Trigger.
You would have to grind a lot to. That might take some time.
No, there's no grinding in Chrono Cross.
Hmm.
Because you can, depending on your progress in the game, you can. I'm sorry, I'm talking over you. What, Lewis?
I was asking Barry if he was thinking of Tony Hawk.
No. Chrono Cross.
Tony Hawk.
No, Tony Hawk is close. There's no time travel, but there is a skateboard.
Yes, there is. That's what you use to grind in Tony Hawk. You grind on the railings.
Yeah, a different form of grind.
Yeah, Tony Hawk and Chrono Cross both use an element from Back to the Future. Alright, so Vincent actually nailed the reason that I recommended this book there.
Is it that it's horrible?
No, it's the...
You might be required to recommend a good thing now. Like, that might be a requirement we put on you.
Okay, first of all, suggestions are not recommendations.
Maybe you should suggest something that's worth people's time.
They don't necessarily.
You recommended a David Foster Wallace essay that made Vincent shield his eyes in horror.
I didn't realize that Vincent had that big of an issue with reading a page of David Foster Wallace.
Anyway,
yeah.
So the reason I suggested this was the extreme tonal shift about halfway into it. The part where, like, it starts out, you feel like this is some light comedy, sci-fi, detective story thing. It's this futuristic world where it's this big city split up into neighborhoods. Like, there's the neighborhood where all these really active Type A people live. There's this neighborhood where nobody's allowed to make any sound. There's this neighborhood that just cats live there. All this stuff like that.
Whoa, a neighborhood where cats live.
That ends up playing a bigger role in it than you would expect.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then there's this weird shift out of sci-fi into more fantasy kind of horror, mostly fantasy, when they go into Dreamland. That just struck me as very interesting, this kind of abandonment of the expectations that the book has been building up to that point. And I don't feel like the author just decided to change gears partway through. I feel like that was a deliberate thing, that building up one type of atmosphere and then abandoning it. I think he was very much going for that effect, and this is the strongest example I know of somebody actually carrying that out in a long work.
I feel like there's some other example of that that's on the tip of my brain, but I can't think of what it is. Something where you get like halfway through and then you realize...
You're thinking of Robin Hood Ghosts of Sherwood.
Yes. Or you get halfway through and you realize it has no ghosts in it.
What?
That movie actually did do something kind of similar in that it starts out seeming like a really badly done Robin Hood movie, and then it turns into a badly done zombie movie. I do not feel like this book is bad on that sort of level. I enjoyed reading it.
For me, it wasn't so much... Right, it was a shift in genre. I didn't feel like it was a real abrupt shift in tone or anything. To me, it was like a gradual just sinking of my hopes for the book. That, like, it took a while before I really hit me that no, this book's never going to get good again. Like, it's just terrible for the rest of it. So, I mean...
Well, my interpretation of the shift in tone there is more like that the danger that they're in starts being more real and personal. It's this more menacing force. That's why I say it starts to have some horror elements to it.
Yeah, because I mean,
early on there's stuff like he goes to Red neighborhood where there's a bunch of violent gangs and such, but it's still it's done in the way that, somebody writing some sci-fi comedy would write that.
Right. The fact that people are getting murdered all around him is just a joke, and it's never treated even a person. Yeah. And it's even, I mean, it's essentially just given some, thin excuse for why he's not in any danger, despite the fact that everyone's getting killed all around him. It's like, oh, well, he's buddies with this bad dude who, like, practically runs the joint, so obviously he couldn't get killed anywhere. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I don't know that all the dream stuff,
Like, the risk of taking this approach that he does, I mean, when you build up somebody's expectations for what type of story you're telling, and then you go against that completely, that does have a downside. You're breaking what the reader was expecting to get out of it. Like, you no longer have even the light science fiction attempt at having everything make sense according to some rules. Like you said, once they get to Dreamland, anything can happen, which is pretty accurate. About Dreamland's rules are extremely vaguely defined. And for a science fiction book, that's a major flaw. But at that point, it stopped trying to be science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really care about the rules and the genre restrictions anyway. I don't even care that much about my expectations. Like, if there had been, let's say, instead of going to Dreamland and all that stuff, I mean, this was a world where there are, like, aliens and all kinds of crap. Let's just say, like, halfway through the book, he got abducted by aliens and taken across the universe, and we never heard anything about the mystery again because it just got dropped because he got abducted. I wouldn't be complaining. I wouldn't be saying, oh, that's terrible, we didn't find out what happened. I probably would be saying, that was a really interesting, bold choice to build up all that stuff and then just drop it. Like, that is an interesting decision to make. But this, it doesn't come across to me as, like, an interesting or daring choice. It just seems so lazy. I hate when, well, it seems like anything you build up could have then been ended with this way. Like, it didn't even matter what the build up to it was. It's the equivalent of someone waking up from a dream. Or I watched some movie, I can't remember what it was called, where someone was like searching for her daughter through the whole movie, and people kept telling her daughter didn't exist, and then she got to the end, and turned out it was like aliens, like doing experiments on human beings to see how they react to stuff, and so it was all
like what
made
happens
up.
when we trick somebody into thinking she has a daughter.
Right, and then the whole thing was just like, well, who gives a shit? Like, what a waste of my time. I mean, that's like, so the whole, I mean,
well,
what kind of a story to tell?
Well, but that's a cop-out ending. It's not a cop-out
Right, I mean,
middle of the book twist.
I don't think
that's an unusual place to put that.
It's not immediately clear what kind of a cop-out this is. It's not until you're 3/4 of the way, or maybe even further than that, before you find out that it's this guy he used to know that's behind it, and they keep saying, but he's dead, but you don't really know what that means, because it could mean anything in Dreamland that this guy's dead. So then you find out, oh, he really is dead, but somehow, like, because he's...
It's the narrator's memory of him.
Yeah, and because Dreamland shit can happen, this guy can still pop out and make people's heads explode and stuff.
Yeah, Lewis, I hope you don't mind that we're giving you all these spoilers for a book that you've bought and haven't read yet.
I guess I'm trying to separate the fact that I hate the book from what you're saying about the genre shift in the middle. I don't know that really. I don't think that it was.
And I'm trying not to defend this on the grounds that I think it's good, because that's, of course, beside the point.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I gotta ignore the fact that the genre shift I thought was terrible, because I think it just went a terrible direction. Just the fact that it shifted that. I still don't. I don't know. No, to me, what's notable really is just that it's done so badly, not that it's done, not that it's because I don't think it is that big of a shift. It's still kind of goofy and silly when they get to Dreamland. I mean, things gradually get more serious, but that's not unusual, even with like a comedic story. I mean, hell, that happens in The Last Action Hero. That by the end, stuff gets more serious and deadly, right? No, I can't. Would I refer to this book again as an example?
Would you refer to it as an example of doing an abrupt midway shift badly?
If I did, it would only be because we had both read it and you made me read it and we talked about it. Like, it wouldn't be something... I would not
bring it up at dinner party.
Yeah, I don't think other people need to read it to understand that concept.
But perhaps you would need to have read it to articulate why you think a genre tone shift needs to be done in a particular way.
But see, that's the... Whatever the problem is with the genre shift in this book is so overshadowed by just how bad the second half of the book is. Like, regardless of context, whatever the beginning of that story was, the second half of that story is just garbage. So I think even if you tried to suggest it for that reason, whatever reason you're suggesting it for is just going to be lost. Like, I couldn't suggest it to say, hey, this is a bad genre shift. It's just a genre shift in a bad book. I gotta give it a thumbs down.
Lewis? Lewis, are you there? Lewis, are you asleep? I think Lewis is asleep.
He probably had to, like, go to another birthday party for himself.
He probably really enjoyed buying the book. I mean, and holding it in his hands. So I'm not going to speak for him, but you know, if I was in the same position, and you know, finding it that amazing that the concept of dinner study is here, you don't really know what's going on, but it sounds like a 3-day birthday surfers don't have as much dinner study, you know, and so you know, based on that, I would have given it a thumbs up. Just have it right there.
All right, so that's a very hypothetical thumbs up from Barry.
Yeah. You know, and then you know, I would think like maybe from now on when you have dinner parties, you know, you just have the audiobook playing really loud so nobody else can talk over it. And then you get your reading done and you can eat, and everybody else can you know, study it and discuss it at the end of the chapter or something. I don't know.
Oh, Lewis, you're awake.
Well, just now.
Great. So, based on the long discussion we just had of only forward, thumbs up or thumbs down?
What did Vincent give it?
He gave it a thumbs down. Oh, man, did you miss our entire discussion of it?
I heard about tonal shift.
Okay. Oh, so this is good. You didn't hear very many spoilers for this book that you bought but haven't read yet.
I'm gonna give it a thumbs down.
Alright, well, I'm going to give it a thumbs up because I personally am going to refer back to it in conversations with Vincent.
What did Barry give it?
I gave it a thumbs up.
Okay.
That was on the basis of some extended digression about dinner parties, I think.
In fairness, isn't the whole second half of the book an extended digression from what Vincent was saying?
That's not digression, really. It does resolve the main plot from the first section.
Yeah, there's
just
the dinner party.
The way you would expect.
I think it's time for new recommendations.
All right, who wants to go first?
Barry, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I had in my head, what was it? I was thinking tavern blanket. And yeah, tavern blanket.
What is tavern blanket?
I was just see when the first person was going to ask that, I was just going to answer tavern blanket, and then like probably at the end he'll just say tavern blanket. But then I decided, well, why not just skip that and just go to something different? And then so I decided the works of MC Escher. The relook at them, and there's just a lot of work there, and he's pretty influential and good pictures, and that's it.
I like it.
With the choice adventure of Tavern Blanket, if you really wanted to, but.
All right, I'll put down the works of MC Escher.
Okay.
Parentheses Tavern Blanket.
Yeah.
Vincent.
I'm going to recommend a book, kind of in response to Ben's response, but I'm going to give you an out because if you don't.
Vincent, you're going to suggest a book.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm glad. Okay, that was a good interruption. Yeah, I'm going to suggest a book, but I'm giving it out. If you don't want to, if you can't get a hold of the book or you don't want to read it, just read a plot summary. The plot summary will get across what I want to suggest it for. Although it is one of my favorite books. It's Who Censored Roger Rabbit.
Oh.
How did I know that was?
I've heard of that book, but I've not read it.
That's so weird. I bought that one on Kindle too a long time ago.
Did you read it?
No, not yet.
Well, now you have a reason to.
Oh man, that makes me so tempted to suggest Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But I'm not going to.
That's a perfect.
You realize they're different, right?
Yes. But one is loosely based on the other. It would make for a really interesting discussion.
It's a good movie.
Good crossover.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to suggest a particular Usenet post by Kaibo titled "Trolling for Dollars." I'll link you guys to it in the episode notes.
Okay.
So, Lewis, I'm recommending a single Usenet post instead of a novel.
Okay, that's a good call. I'm going to suggest All Hail West Texas by the Mountain Goats. It is available on Groove Shark, so you could listen to it.
Is that a song?
No, it's the name of an album.
Okay.
It's like a 38-minute album, I think. Recorded on his boombox.
Album All Hail West Texas by the Mountain Goats.
And I think the whole album's on Groove Shark, so you don't have to pay to listen to it.
All right. Well, it gives us 4 suggestions for next time.
All right.
So, good night and happy suggesting.
All right, take us offline.
Okay.
Good night.